do it later. And I welcome Ruth Woodall, who is in the Madison Club, and she is going Lieutenant Governor-elect of Division Two. So I'm looking forward to working with her as part of Division Two on October 1st. Welcome, Ruth.
Yeah, and I am so proud that I'm turning it over to someone that's so deserving.
Well,
I don't know about that, but anyway, thank you.
we'll give her all the help we can.
Yes, yes.
Sharon Barker is with Family and Children's Services, and I think in the invitation I sent out, which you have all received, there is a lengthy recap of her education and job responsibilities at Family and Children's Services. She is also assigned as, I think, the community partner coordinator, and then also responsibility for the Resilient Communities Task Force. But she, I think you're on the Building Strong Brain Steering Committee, aren't you?
Right, with ACE Nashville Parent Community Engagement team.
Right, and so Diane Halstead, who's in our club with Ready Nation, but she's moving to Virginia, and Connie Cash, past president of Tennessee Association for Children Early Education, are also on the Building Strong Brains private sector steering committee, as I am. So ACES is one of the tasks that we were asked to take on as a signature project because the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth and Department of Children's Services knew that Kiwanis focused on children. They already had participation from Rotary, which doesn't necessarily focus on kids, but they have a statewide campaign. So they said, well, we can't do this without Kiwanis support. So we want it not only throughout Tennessee, but even in Kentucky and with my Glendale, California club, that they're going to take on similar projects. So Sharon probably did a 3-day training for trainers that they have done for the last 5 years since Governor Haslam, with I think with Chrissy's prodding, initiated the program, and also the Read to Be Ready for literacy, because the children, 71% of the third graders were behind grade level in reading, and now with losing virtually a year of education, that figure is unfortunately probably going the wrong direction. So Kiwanis has made a commitment to help the at least the 4 schools we're working with now, and with Bookham and Pencil and other partners, that we're going to do our best to try to provide some of the resilience and mitigation that's necessary. But the presentation tonight that Sharon is going to do, we are recording so that the members who are unable to be here tonight, and even those of us who need a refresher course or want to share it with our clubs, with the Tellico Village and the Madison clubs, and any other club in the district, that will at least have a recording of it. But Sharon has offered, whether through Zoom or Microsoft Teams or GoToMeeting, to share it with other Kiwanis clubs or with any group, particularly now that we're still, a lot of the clubs are meeting virtually. So Sharon, the podium is yours, and you have access to the screen and did test your presentation. So it's about a 45-minute presentation. So we will welcome any questions that you have. Do you prefer all of them maybe after your presentation, or while it?
I'm fine with you stopping in the, you can stop me. I like to be conversational, so you can stop me if you want to, or you can ask them at the end. It's not a problem. However you want to jump in, feel free to, because I just like to be very conversational about the presentation. Okay. So, hey everybody, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. Well, it was up there, wasn't it? when we did it before. Hold on a second. We did this and practiced it, and now let me see if I can share it. Hold on. Let's close this out. Okay, there we go. All right. Okay, so everybody should be able to see the role of life experiences in shaping brain development. And this is a presentation from Building Strong Brains of Tennessee. Again, I am Sharon Barker, Community Engagement Coordinator and ACEs Facilitator for Family and Children's Service. So as Vic stated, Building Strong Brains of Tennessee is a product that the Governor Lee had put into place. And yeah, it was Governor Lee. The mission is that we want to work to change the culture of Tennessee so that Tennessee's overarching philosophy, the policies that we put in place, the programs and practices for children, youth, and young adults will utilize the latest brain science, because what we're trying to do is prevent and mitigate the impact of ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. And in this training, you will learn that ACEs is a public issue. It's a preventable problem, and it is a solvable problem. And that we all have a stake and a role in the outcomes that matter. So we all benefit from child well-being, and we all have a collective responsibility to children. So when you're looking at this slide, you will see that the Healthy Child Foundation is what all of the pillars of educational achievement, economic productivity, responsible citizenship, and lifelong health rest on. So young people have tremendous potential, and that potential, our society needs that. And that's why we have a shared obligation to foster and protect every child. And we all know every child is filled with remarkable promise. So we have a collective responsibility to prevent violence or other forms of abuse or adversity from damaging a child's potential to learn, to grow, and to contribute to our communities. So this is the reason that a healthy brain development is so important, because you'll see at the top of this slide, when the child's development is healthy, you'll have those strong communities and those healthy economies. So this is a film about what adverse childhood experiences is.
What does your parents' divorce have to do with your risk for heart disease? If your mother had a drinking problem when you were growing up, are you more likely to suffer from depression as an adult? Here's what you should know about ACEs. ACEs stand for Adverse Childhood Experiences, extremely stressful events that can happen to a child growing up. Some experiences are so stressful that they can alter brain development, as well as the immune system, increasing the risk of lifelong health and social problems in adulthood. The term comes from the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, landmark research that shed new light on the root cause of everything from stroke and liver disease to substance abuse and mental illness. In the late 1990s, an epidemiologist from the Centers for Disease Control and a preventive medicine doctor at Kaiser Permanente set out to understand the association between childhood experience and lifelong health. They asked over 17,000 people in the Kaiser Health Plan in San Diego about their health history, as well as difficult questions about their experiences growing up. Anda and Felidi tallied up 10 different kinds of adversity in this largely middle-class and college-educated population. They were stunned to see how common ACEs were. 21% of all respondents were sexually abused as children. 19% grew up with someone who suffered mental illness. 28% had been physically abused. And 2 out of 3 respondents had experienced at least one ACE. The researchers next looked at how someone's ACE score, or the number of adversities they experienced, related to a wide array of serious health and social problems. They saw that the more ACEs someone had, the greater their risk for poor outcomes compared with someone with no ACEs. Someone with an ACE score of 4 had twice the risk of heart disease and cancer. Someone with an ACE score of 5 had an 8 times greater chance of being an alcoholic. And those with an ACE score of 6 or more, on average, died 20 years earlier. With every major problem they looked at in the ACE study, the risk went up for each additional adverse experience in childhood. As Dr. Robert Anda says, what's predictable is preventable. It's important to remember that ACEs are not destiny. ACEs are a tool for understanding the health of a population as a whole. For individuals, an ACE score can be a tool for understanding their own risk for health and social problems, and empower them to make changes for themselves and their children. ACEs tend to get passed down from generation to generation and are common across all income levels, races, and cultures. But increasingly, people of all different professions and backgrounds are coming together to discuss how ACEs affect their communities. They're finding new ways to treat and prevent ACEs. Many doctors are starting to screen their patients for ACEs as part of their medical history. More schools are becoming trauma-informed, considering the source of problem behavior when disciplining their students, instead of immediately suspending or expelling them. To learn more about interrupting the cycle of adversity and improving health and well-being for the next generation, please visit kpjrfilms.co.
Okay, so let's pop out of that. All right. So when we're talking about ACEs and children, so let's switch over and make certain that when you're going through this training, you might know a child that, you're wondering why does this child, behave the way they do, or why is this child having so many issues? Get that child in your head while you're going through this training, and then you'll see that child differently once you're finished with this training, and you'll respond a lot differently too. When we're talking about ACEs, we're talking about toxic stress. And in this slide, you see the difference between positive stress and tolerable and toxic. Now, stress is just that physical, mental, or emotional strain or tension. We all experience it at one time or another in one degree or another. So sometimes you have the positive stressors, and that one is like when a child goes to school for the first time and they're afraid to be away from mommy. So, they cry a little bit, the little blood pressure goes up a little bit, but as soon as they get to class and meet new friends and meet their teacher, they're excited about it. They come home, they're ready to go the next day. Look in that first positive stress section of the slide, and you see that they have all of those people there with them, cheering them on, waiting for them, watching them take that hurdle. And so that kind of stress is good because it prepares the brain and the body for stressful situations later in life. All right, then you go to what's called tolerable stress. And that's when you come to a stressful situation that's tragic, that's unavoidable. It could be like the natural disasters that we had. It could be the COVID disasters. It could be tornadoes. It could be losing a loved one. All of those things are very stressful situations. They can be tolerable if you have that supportive caregiver or that buffer that's around you to help you with that stress response. And those events won't do lasting damage to the brain and the body. You will have those spikes in the way the body handles the stress, but they'll come back down because you have that support system. You'll see that demonstrated in that part of the slide where the little girl is going through something, but look at those people up there pulling her through it. And that's what helps you to overcome the tolerable stress. And, you know, those things, those situations can come and go on the anniversary of that tragic event. But as the anniversaries come and go, that stress doesn't spike nearly as much as when the event first happened. So that's what's called tolerable stress. And the key to tolerable stress, again, is having that support system that helps you buffer it. And that could be community resources, that could be Kiwanis Club members, that could be churches. All of those buffering relationships help to interrupt the stress response before it turns into what's next. And that's called the toxic stress. Now, when you look at that, this little girl is up against abuse or neglect or parental addiction or household dysfunction, all kinds of adversity. And not just one time. What makes the stress toxic is that it's ongoing, repeated exposure to that abuse, neglect, or dysfunction. And that's what's bad for the brain development. And what you notice in the toxic stress section of this is that there is no buffer for this child. She is going through it alone. Nobody is helping her. Nobody is seeing her through it, talking her through it. And so that's what creates the stress response and makes it toxic, and what causes that floods the body with dangerous levels of stress hormones, where then the brain development is affected. And so sometimes that could be like you're always thinking that a tiger is coming. When we are typically exposed to a tiger, we go, and we run, and the body, all the functions and the hormones all kick in, and your heart rate goes up, and your blood pressure goes up, and your serum glucose levels goes up, and all those inflammatory cytokines, everything, you're in that fight or flight mode, and your body is supposed to do that in those stressful times and until you're out of that situation. And so that's your fight or flight response kicking in. But toxic stress is this child is in that mode all the time, even when there's no tiger there. So it's like paper tigers are there, no real tigers, but they constantly feel like a tiger is after me, and their body is, and their hormone responses are doing exactly what I said, with all those hormones going all over the place. And so that's them trying to deal all the time with this level of toxicity in their stress hormones. And this type of stress affects them well into adult life, sometimes through addictions, physical and mental health problems. And toxic stress is made worse when there's no support there. There's nobody there to help buffer that response. And so the stress chemicals is what's damaging to the structures in the brain. And that's what's harming the body. So let's move on. So when we're talking about brain architecture, because what we're talking about here is developing that brain. So in the Building Strong Brains module, we like to akin that to building a house. So when you're building a home, what's the first thing you do? Right? You lay the foundation. And some of the symptoms that let you know that you have not laid a good foundation in that house is that maybe years later, you will start to see that you're having roofing issues, you're having cracks in the wall, you're having uneven floors. Well, just like building a home, the earliest years of a person's life is when you lay the foundation for all future development, addictions, disease, academic problems, poor life choices. And just like houses, people are built from the foundation up in sequential order. So things taught at the appropriate stage is what's proper. You're not going to put a roof on the house first. You're going to lay the foundation first. So requiring, people to make certain that when you're dealing with children, you're dealing with them on their level, so that you're not treating them like they're a 12-year-old when they're 6, or expecting more out of them than the stage that they are at. So when you're building a house, what do you have? You have lots of individuals with skills that are specific to what they're doing for the house, like what your roofers and your electricians and what your plumbers. These are all people that have different skills and they're high quality. They know what they're doing, and these are the people that you want working on your house. Well, children in the same way need a lot of individuals in their lives with many different skills. They need high quality relationships, like, they need good doctors, they need good teachers. You want to put them in church where they can learn, spiritual things. They need parents and aunts and uncles, all quality people. Just like you would when you're building a house, you want to put the same kind of quality people in children's lives, because if the foundation is not strong early in life, it definitely will show up later in their life. And that can show up in the juvenile justice system or, mental health services. All of those things will let you know that the foundation may not have been as sturdy as you had wanted them to be. Children can only thrive if they have regular interactions with responsive, caring adults. And so that's why it matters that neglect is the most commonly reported form of child maltreatment. Child neglect is a signal that families that are experiencing an overload of stress of some kind that weighs on them can help to make the child's life, a little harder, because parents are depressed or can't seem to take care of their families. And so that's why we want to make certain that children have that strong, sturdy foundation when they're growing up. Now, this is going to show you how brains are built.
Science tells us that the experiences we have in the first years of our lives actually affect the physical Think of a young child's brain as the control tower at a busy airport. All those planes landing and taking off and all of the support systems on the ground simultaneously demand the controller's attention to avoid a crash. It's the same with a young child learning to pay attention, plan ahead and remember, and follow lots of rules. Like all of us, kids have to react to things happening in the world around them, while also dealing with worries, temptations, and obligations on their minds. As these demands for attention pile up, air traffic control helps a child regulate the flow of information, prioritize tasks, and above all, find ways to manage stress and avoid mental collisions along the way. Having this ability is a necessity for positive and level mental health. Developing effective air traffic control, overcoming toxic stress, and building solid brain architecture are things kids can't do on their own. And since strong societies are made up of healthy, contributing individuals, it's up to us as a community to make sure all young people have the kinds of nurturing experiences they need for positive development. To build better futures, we need to build better brains.
Okay, so one very important early intervention is called serve and return interaction, and this helps to build brains and skills. And so that's when young children are naturally seeking that interaction. So you have kids or grandkids or nieces and nephews that you've probably been around when they were babies, and you do the goo-goo and the gagang and the babbling and all the facial expressions. And that's just not something silly that we do. That actually is essential for the development of healthy brain circuits. That's going to be supporting that child's ability to learn language skills, communication skills, and it's building on all of the skills that they learn to create and build those neural responses that the brain is going through at each level of learning. And it works best when you have a trusting relationship between a child and an adult who's responsive to that child's own unique individuality. So the most important relationships begin in the family, but often also involve other adults that have important roles in children's lives, such as the grandparents, as I stated, teachers, mentors. When you're going to read as a Kiwanian to the school kids, like you're going to do Vic this week, that serve and return interaction helps to teach children how to communicate, and it helps to build those neurons in the brain that the children will need for their next level and stage of development. And it's kind of like when you're at church and the pastor is saying God is good, and the congregation will say all the time, and they say all the time, and they say God is good. That's serve and return interaction. Everybody likes to have that bounce back. Well, children naturally do that as well, and it helps the child to know that, what, if I'm saying something, I'm going to get a response. There's a great little video where this guy was on the couch with his, I don't know, the child didn't look to be like maybe 8 or 9 months or something. And they're actually having this conversation through Babel. And the dad would say something and the child would, and the dad would go, really? Is that right? And the child would go, and the dad would go, yeah, I thought the same thing. And they were actually having this serve and return, bounce back and forth conversation that was really causing the child's neurons in the brain to just be firing on all cylinders. And I thought it was the cutest thing, but it was a really good example of serve and return interaction and how essential that was. And I could just imagine if I saw that child today, that's probably over a year old, the vocabulary and just the communication skills that child probably developed because that parent was constantly engaging in serve and return interactions. So when you saw the video a minute ago, you saw them talk about air traffic control. And that's basically self-regulation that children develop over time. And that's a group of skills that help kids to focus on all those multiple streams of information. I mean, kids have to know, well, school is saying doing this, and mom and dad is saying doing this, and church is, I got to do this for church, and I got to do this for this outside activity. And they got to set these goals. And I've got to do all of these things, and all of this information is coming to them from all angles. Well, when you have a child that has probably had a lot of adversity and exposed to a lot of toxic stress and experienced a lot of trauma in childhood, they typically may not have been able to develop those executive functioning skills that help them to know how to manage all these different pieces of information coming to them at all these different levels. And so sometimes what that looks like when they get older is they may not know that I better pay bills instead of buy those pair of shoes, or I better, do what I need to do to get to do what I want to do. They were too busy trying to survive. So sometimes they don't get those executive functioning skills. So when you run into a kid that may not have gotten those things, you know how to step back and not expect so much, because those skills may not have been developed. But executive functioning skills are a key biological foundation to getting kids ready for school, as well as, like I said, those outcomes in health and employability. So if you have a lot of employees, that grow up that you like, don't they know better than to do this, that, or the other? Maybe they don't, because you really got to look at maybe sometimes those skills were not developed. And sometimes it don't even have to be a child that had a lot of adversity. I think sometimes my 24-year-old is just spoiled rotten, didn't get those executive functioning skills developed like he should have, because I was waiting on him hand and foot. But so again, those executive functioning skills are what develops to help the child focus on multiple streams of income. And these skills can develop early in life, but they can also be developed along the lifespan. Okay, so you don't say, well, if they didn't get it in childhood, they'll never get it. No, you can rewire a brain, through neuroplasticity. So just keep working with people, because your brain can learn new things all the time. But it's those sensitive periods of development that is better to help them to gain those skills. The good news is that, the past is not set in stone, and there are multiple moments of possibility for change during different periods and stages of life. So besides childhood, adolescence is another one of those points where they can learn. And because, in adolescence, they're already exploring new opportunities and identities. So that is another really good point to try to get those executive functioning skills in if they were not able to get them in early childhood. So this slide would just show you how the ACEs affects your health, your behavior, your life potential. And as you see, the dose graded response is a relationship between the number of ACEs and the outcomes that go along with that. So the more ACEs you have, you see that you have a higher risk for the negative health and well-being outcomes. That's all that slide is showing. And this one is just based on Tennessee. So this was an old, kind of outdated, that's the last one we have. They haven't updated this slide. But you see that 27% had 3 or more ACEs, and that's 1 in 4. And at least 61% of Tennesseans had at least 1 ACE. So when they did this questionnaire back in the 90s, the conventional ACEs were the physical and emotional and sexual abuse, the physical and emotional, neglect, DV, living with a person that has substance abuse issues, incarcerated care provider, and living with someone that had a mental illness in the home. Since this study, they have expanded ACEs to witnessing violence, living in unsafe neighborhoods, experiencing racism, living in foster care, experiencing bullies. And I dare to say that if they were to expand it even further after 2020, you would probably add living through a pandemic as an adverse childhood experience, because it has been for a lot of children ongoing repeated exposure to social isolation and maybe neglect. So we may see that living through a pandemic could be an expanded ACEs. And when they first did this study back in the 90s, this was on a population of people that were mostly college educated and white. And so if you were getting this many people with ACEs with that population, can you imagine adding in the rest of the demographic to it? So I want you to, what I love about this is that what's predictable is preventable. I love that saying that Felitti said, because when we know what causes ACEs, then we look at, okay, how can we solve it? How can we prevent it? And how can we help our children to be resilient or have those positive outcomes despite those negative experiences that they are exposed to. So this is the resilience part of the presentation.
You can think of a child's development as a scale that has two sides. A child's scale is placed in a community and has spaces on either side where experiences and environmental influences stack up over the course of development. One side gets stacked with negative factors like stress, violence, and neglect, while the other side gets loaded with positive factors like supportive relationships, skill-building opportunities, and community resources. In the same way that the weight on a teeter-totter affects the direction it tips, the factors that a child is exposed to affect how they turn out, the outcomes of their development. But the way that the scale tips and the outcomes a child experiences is also a function of the position of the scale's fulcrum, which is like the genetic makeup of the child. The position of the fulcrum affects how the scale responds to factors that get stacked on either side and how easily it tips. We know that fulcrum starts in different places for different children, and that this genetic starting point is an important factor in how a child responds to experiences and how they turn out. We also know that the position of the fulcrum isn't fixed. It's a sliding set point. Over time, the things that load and tip the scale can actually shift the position of the fulcrum. There are points in human development when this fulcrum is easier to shift. During these shiftable periods, our biology can be changed, making us more or less able to withstand negative weight that gets stacked on the scale. One of these shiftable periods is early childhood, and another is adolescence. That's why it's so important to make sure that children have positive experiences, especially early on, and to continue positive supports throughout development. By providing positive experiences during these sensitive periods of development and offloading negative weight, we can shift the fulcrum, making children more able to bear the weight of negative experiences later on, making them more resilient. So resilience isn't just about individual children. It's about the environments and experiences that get stacked on their resilience scale. Resilient societies are those that figure out how to stack more positives than negatives onto the children that will become workers and citizens.
So that's what I love about the resiliency part, is that it's focusing on positive experiences, providing positive experiences and creating positive environments in which children can grow and even out that, move that fulcrum and even out that the weight that they're experiencing on the negative side. And so ways you can do that, some options are, peer support groups, alternative wellness, therapy, art therapy, trauma-sensitive yoga, putting kids in music or dance therapy, karate, any kind of healing activity that allows that child the empowerment that they need, that they can release stress or, just feel like, I'm in a safe and stable and nurturing environment. Sometimes kids, don't know how to talk to you about what they're going through or what it's feeling like, or how to even express positively their trauma. And that's how come sometimes if they don't know and they don't have any other ways to get it out, it can come out in a negative way, like a temper tantrum, a throwing, or cussing, or all that kind of stuff. So if you can provide more positive activities and childhood experiences to children that are experiencing ACEs, then they can become more resilient. So, you know, when children grow up in those safe, stable, and nurturing environments, and they have those really good relationships, they become more productive adults and citizens. So we're just trying to keep them free from physical and emotional harm, and set those familiar routines and set those familiar people and places so that they have some stability. And that when they're grounded and in stability, they can be more resilient as well, as long as they have those nurturers around them and they're being encouraged, and they're in a safe place for development. So again, we always like to focus on trying to invest early. If you look at this, you'll see that the brain's capacity to change is highest at that 0. Then it goes, you know, it gets a little less plastic, I guess, down as it goes to 20 years old. But look what that does to the spending. Spending on programs to change the brain is lower when it should be higher at the place where their brain is more capable or apt to change. And so we have it we need to shift from remediation to prevention, because we're spending more money when they get down to when they get up to the 20-year-old, because we didn't do anything when they were younger to help with that, when their brains were more apt to change. I hope I said that right. Sometimes I say that so crazy. So what can be done about ACEs across the lifespan? Well, it's about investing in the lives of children early. And we can do that through being trauma informed, investing in healthcare and high quality childcare. When our businesses and organizations get together and help with supporting working parents, trying to provide parent support programs for teens and pregnancy prevention programs. And I think Kiwanis can play a big part in helping with mitigating ACEs. The younger a person is, like we said, the more their brain has the capacity to change. So when we can do it early, that's going to be best. When people have access to mental health, substance abuse treatment, teaching people about intimate partner violence, when we're making policy, keeping in mind sufficient income to support low-income families, bringing the community development and childhood development together, and those social supports for parents, and so much more. So, you know, policies that strengthen family financial security can go a long way toward reducing childhood adversity and enhancing relationships that help children thrive. When families face financial hardship, it sets the stage for more stress and less tuned in interaction with children. And what that does is so if we are boosting family incomes through things like, you know, child tax credits or paid family leave, this helps to relieve the pressure on these families, and it can help to head off that childhood adversity even before it happens. So the new norm is just shifting the conversation. Instead of when you see a child that may be acting badly, or, you know, you just can't figure out why this child acts the way that they do, we want to shift from saying, what is wrong with that kid? You know, because that we want to start saying what's happened to that kid to make them act that way. And when we do that, it causes us to respond more compassionately, We have more empathy, and we can kind of see things through a trauma-informed lens, because when we're trauma-informed, we say, okay, I know. And when we're trauma sensitive, we say, I care. And when we're trauma responsive, we say, I'm going to act. And when we are trauma specific, we engage a trauma model as a practice. So we want to be all of those: trauma informed, trauma sensitive, trauma responsive, and trauma specific when we are faced with children that we know have experienced childhood adversity. So that's the end of this really abbreviated ACEs training. This is actually a 3-hour training. So we try to kind of, it's a lot of it you didn't get, but that I kind of tried to hit the highlights of it. And this is the link. If you all wouldn't mind just taking your phone, if you have a scan. If you don't, I'm going to send the survey link to Vic. It's just 3 questions. That's all it is. It's 3 questions. Did you know about ACEs before? Did you learn something? And is there anything that you could incorporate into, you know, your daily interactions with children as a result of learning about ACEs? So if you wouldn't mind, that helps us in the Building Strong Brains arena to let the Governor Lee know that the initiative is working, that more people are getting exposed to what ACEs is, and hopefully they will continue to fund the Building Strong Brains initiative so that we can get this information out to more people in the Tennessee area. So that's the QR code, but I will send the link that you can just click on, and it can send it out to everybody. So I'm going to stop share. And does anybody have any questions? Thank you.
Sharon, this is Ruth. Is this the same thing as what they have in high schools, the ACEs educational stuff they have in high school?
No, unless somebody is coming that has went through the train the trainer training, they're probably not getting this, but they are probably incorporating a lot of this in some schools. I'm going to send the questionnaire to Beck as well, because you may want to share the questionnaire with somebody that it has all 10 questions, and you can see your own score, or you can, you know, share it with people. But I always like to tell people, if you're going to take the ACEs questionnaire, sometimes it can be triggering. Make sure you have somebody to reach out to if you need to unpack or, you know, talk about some things that come up from the questionnaire. But this portions of this, yeah, may be taught in schools, but this.
Well, they that program, in my experience, they've worked with underrepresented schools. I know they had it in Pearl-Cohn, Antioch, and then they had a little office there. But it's for helping students. But I don't know if it was the same thing as you have, but it was just
yeah. So we don't typically give this training to children. The reason why is that if a child is in active is experiencing active, you know, adversity, it could be really triggering for them. And so we like to give it to teachers or, you know, counselors to help them identify children that may be experiencing adversity. But the children themselves, we don't give this to them because it can't.
Yeah, well, they had people that worked in the schools, so this training would be for them, not the
yeah, not the children themselves. But what is really good is we're trying through this training, we're trying to get more pediatricians to screen for ACEs. That's a very good way to screen for it, and plus you have the medical the medical professional there. Because a lot of times when a child is experiencing a lot of stomach aches and headaches and a lot of, you know, physical stress responses, it's due to, you know, maybe some adversity going on. And so we're trying to get doctors, pediatricians to screen. But I do think teachers and counselors, they need to be aware of the signs, you know, and what to look for, and then how to respond, because we don't want to re-trigger a child in how we respond. So if a child is acting out and then we're screaming and hollering, or, you know, doing something that's just re-triggering them, it's not going to get any better. So we need to make certain that people understand what adverse childhood experiences are. And instead of saying, oh, that child is so bad, then stop doing that and go, I wonder what is causing that response. Why is that child acting like that? Because when you start peeling back the layers, then you can probably find out that maybe there's some trauma there that needs to be addressed, and that child can get the help that they need so that they can, you know, grow and develop in a healthy way.
Yeah,
So,
Sharon, this is Gracie.
mhm,
We have to also think about liability.
mhm.
Also, this kind of situation that I can think of tons of them that
I know.
cross my path in
Mhm,
my
I bet.
in my work line, or in my working days. It's also, we have to think about in sharing information, not just with parents, but even the children, others, which that information is very private. So you have to really think about yourself and getting permission to even conduct such. So the guidance counselors, I think, could play an excellent part
Excellent.
in this situation, as well as the principal and the teacher
Yeah,
can come together, but not just throwing it out there to say,
yeah,
you know, let's
yeah.
do it for the whole community. No, we cannot do that because of like I said, the litigation that could really peak his head tremendously when it
So
comes to.
what litigation would come? What litigation could come from just bringing awareness to what ACEs is, Gracie?
Well, when I say litigation, when you look at the age of the children that
Mhm.
you're referring to, also it doesn't matter whether the child is a pre-K or a senior in high school, but there are all sorts of things that you must go through. And as a principal, I've seen some of these things working with social workers and other individuals, and it's very unique. And I think when we get into these kinds of things with discussions or what have you that you're doing with children or with their parents, um, there's a lot of legal aspects that you
Yeah,
have to.
we definitely wouldn't give this to a child.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
we
not at all.
give it as information to teachers, or because I've given it to a lot of metro schools.
Yeah, but
Yes.
what I'm saying is, it's yes, those are the persons that are
Yeah,
directly
exactly.
impacted this.
Yeah.
But you would not want to do, say, an assembly on this,
Oh yeah.
without really,
No,
with,
absolutely not. I
without,
agree.
and when I say you, I'm speaking, I guess,
I know.
myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are guidelines that you must go by, and Julie
Sure.
Hopkins can attest to the fact that
Sure.
when you get children, when you start looking into children's files, there are lots of red lights that you must look at prior to sharing this information, even with individuals in the building, in your building, or even other family members if you don't have the right to do so. So I don't want, anybody to think that we can just walk in and say, okay, even if it's whatever we're discussing within an Kiwanis activity at school, there are certain guidelines that must be adhered to.
Yeah. This training is really just to show people what ACEs is.
Right.
Just to say, just to be trauma informed to what ACEs is, and that's all. Yeah, we definitely don't want to give it to children or anything like that at all. No, ma'am, you're right about that.
Well, one of the charges that was given to us is, a trauma-informed community is the basis, but both the mitigation and resilience for ACEs, as well as the improvement of the statistics for literacy, those both have to be two-generation solutions. So we have to get the parents involved and the caretakers involved. And in the schools, in addition to helping with the pencil and the community achieves reading programs that we have gotten involved in at the 4 schools, that we would like to start the well-developed and polished K-Kids clubs in the elementary schools, and there's builders in middle and Key Club in high school, but also recognition for academics with the Bring Up Grades program that Kiwanis has had for 50 or 60 years, and the terrific kids programs that when they do achieve, we want to be sure that not only the teachers and the parents, but the community recognizes it and gives appreciation. But probably we had a presentation at our January meeting, and the video is on the website, with Dr. Will Bleckman, who was Kiwanis International President in 1990-91, and was a proponent for young children priority 1 to birth to age 5, or prenatal to age 5 being the most critical years. So we need to spend some time focusing on their school readiness, being ready when most of the brain development should be happening. And that's with the world's greatest babies program and the baby showers. We can get some of the families involved even before a child is born, or if they have toddlers at home, that we can better get them ready to be proficient and ready for school, so that will help both the social emotional learning as well as the literacy and the academic skills. So what we as Kiwanians need to do with our network of social service agencies in the community that have staff that is trained to provide some of the services. We just need to be sure the parents know about who they can turn to for help at an earlier time, and then give the educators all the support that they need, particularly after trying to tackle virtual learning for the past year, and some in classroom and some virtual. So it was probably double work for most of the educators in the community, communities across the country. But I think just knowing the background, and ACE Nashville uses the acronym in a positive aspect, All Children Excel, as the goal for the children that have had adverse experiences. And just Friday, the acesconnection.com website, which services not only throughout the United States, but they also showed that they have some cohorts in Europe and some in Canada and some in Asia that are part of the worldwide response to the ACEs pandemic, that they changed their name to PACE. It's Positive and Adverse Childhood Experiences, and Kiwanis can certainly deal with some of the positives. A lot of clubs love to build playgrounds and even just reading to the kids. The Amtrak program that we're doing as a district project for disabled kids, giving them the adaptive tricycles where they can ride with their friends if they're physically disabled. That there are a lot of things that we can do, but we can't, we want to be sure that we're within the scope of what we can do, but we can be a support for others in their services. Are there other questions for Sharon in terms of the ACEs programs, or other questions generally, and how we as Kiwanians can be involved?
Excellent presentation.
Thank
Carol?
you.
How large is the training staff? If you know there's a problem there, how are you getting out the word
Oh, wow.
from the
We have
organization?
Yeah, it's so many trainers in the trainer bureau that go through this facilitator, train the trainer. I promise you, it's probably 300 or 400 that have gone through in the 3 years that I went through 3 years ago.
Well,
And they're
from-
still having new cohorts. I think they're having a new cohort this year that will probably have another 100 trained. So
Yeah, and there have been trainings from Memphis to Knoxville, Chattanooga, Kingsport, Knoxville. So they've had it throughout the state.
yeah. So that's how we get it out. It's so many trained to provide this training. So it's a lot. So, but if you ever need anybody to do the presentation, you can call me, of course, or you can go to ACE's, what's called PACE now, PACE Connection, and they have a whole trainers bureau, and you can request somebody to come and do the training, but usually it's done in person, and the whole training is a 3-hour training, but we can adapt it down to this shorter period of time, all the way up to the 3 hours.
And there are a lot of good resources at the state, on the state website at Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth and Department of Children's Services, who spearheaded, and it's probably 100 people on the private and public sector steering committees for Building Strong Brains, but from across Tennessee. So they were having virtual meetings even before the pandemic to get everybody involved and on the same page.
So it's just for informational purposes. We're not, we don't use this to diagnose trauma or anything, just trying to help people to recognize what they might see, but definitely not to diagnose, and don't put it out there like you're diagnosing anybody's trauma, because we are not equipped to do that. So I'm glad you said that, Gracie, and I'm going to make certain that I put that in the presentations moving forward, that it is just a tool to educate, but not a diagnostic tool whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't mean to sound so harsh.
No, you didn't sound harsh. That's something that's one thing that has never come up in any of my presentations, and I'm glad it did today, because I don't want people to go away thinking that that it is a diagnostic tool. This is just a information, help you to recognize maybe. Yeah, that's exactly. I do need to make certain that is understood moving forward. So thank you.
And also to let everyone know that teachers go through, training at some point, for laws about certain things, helping them, assisting them in the classroom. So there are many, many many steps that they have to go through in order to be ready to answer these questions when the parents are there. And they know the legitimacy of what can and cannot, because in this, let's face it, in this day and time, everybody's looking for some way to sue someone else. And we also want to keep that in the back of our minds about how can we get the information out there and still be able to do it efficiently. So my hat's off to all of you, community. And I want to say that, the community needs to know this kind of information is out there for schools, and you can be a part of getting it out there.
Yeah, that's what the Building Strong Brains initiative is about. I'm just glad Tennessee is open to actually having this mission. I'm glad. I really am glad that the state of Tennessee is making certain that we're trauma informed as a state. I love that. My hat's off to the governor for that, putting the money into this education. So, because it's a good thing. It's a good thing. But I appreciate you guys hanging in there. I know some of you guys want to get back to your March Madness. So thank you so much. Yay!
Well, thank you. It was good to see all of you. And if there are any follow-up questions, please email me, and I will get that to Sharon, and I will get this recording converted and uploaded to YouTube and have a link on our website. I have under the meetings and events page, I have videos of those meetings that I remember to turn on the recording.
Dick, may I, do you mind if I share with the those persons that are not familiar with Ruth Woodall and what her role will be in working with the organizations, and she's done a lot with a program in helping young people across the state of Tennessee to get scholarships. Ruth is taking my place, which this is the second round that I've had as Lieutenant Governor, and Ruth will be taking on that role in the fall after we meet in the fall. She will be sworn in, so she will be the person that you will be contacting. Not that you can still call me, that's fine, but Ruth will be taking over as Lieutenant Governor at that time.
On
And she
October
is an
1st.
excellent person with information about college, getting into college under her program that she's working with.
Well, and at the same time, she'll be replacing me because we're consolidating the two divisions.
Yes.
And I've only been Lieutenant Governor Division 18 for 5 years, so I'm very thankful to Ruth.
I felt sorry for Gracie. But I do want to say that Vic is the person who introduced me to Kiwanis. I mean, I knew it all my life, but I thought it was just a man thing.
Uh-huh.
But I'm glad that, that we had our Women's History Month, and I'm glad to see all the women, and
Yes.
And I'm real involved in a diversity program. It's called DEAR, Diversity, Equity, Inclusive, and R. I can't think what the R is, but anyway, we're getting that going. But anyway, I'm just looking at all your faces, and I think I know Julie from somewhere. I don't know where. And
Metro schools.
where do you do?
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, she really looks familiar to me, but
Where do
I
you
don't know
do you teach?
I'm at Glencliff, the principal elementary.
Okay, well, I'm the executive director of Tennessee Scholars. I don't know.
Let's see,
You've heard of that.
scholars.
Yeah.
But you were in Metro
But
Nashville.
I taught in National School of the Arts years ago.
And Ruth is the one that gets scholarships for these young people going on to college. So if you know someone, please stay in touch with her because it's a wonderful thing, and she's in a wonderful, wonderful position. And that's not just for the Nashville area, it's across the state of Tennessee. So no matter where you are, that's the lady that you need to pinpoint if you know someone that's graduating from high school.
But if any of you, I also do, Julie, I also do a public outreach for American Chemical Society, helping with children and education and everything. And just kind of aware, we're having Earth Day in the park this year, and we're going to have a lot of hands-on activities for kids there. Talking about the brain part, but we are going to have a virtual and in-person try that this year. Tell all your little students and your schools and grandkids.
All I need is a flyer. Just send a flyer my way, and we can.
Okay, go to NashvilleEarthDay.com.
Okay, great.
2020.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Well, and both Englewood and Glencliff are STEM magnet schools, and we have Mike, who's an IT expert, and we have Carlton Bolejak, who's a chemist and STEM expert, and we have Rick Ostheimer, who was with the Apollo project and IBM, and vice regent of the Board of Trustees for the state Board of Regents. So we have a lot of STEM oriented people. I spent 47 years with Lockheed, and most of it with JPL and NASA. So we have a lot of technology. So we'll help in whether it's Earth Day or the environmental or entrepreneurship STEM programs too.
Well, they do need volunteers for Earth Day. If you want to go to Earth Day, there's a volunteer thing there. But Julie, you have a STEM school?
I do. It's STEAM. We have the
STEAM,
arts
okay, STEAM.
included. Mhm.
Okay, I need
Yes, you're
to.
welcome to come. We focus on entrepreneurship. So everybody here will actually have an opportunity at some point to share once we get past the pandemic, because we love to bring speakers in for our students to hear about the
Well,
experiences. So,
yeah, well, I have a lot of good stuff for your teachers to use in the classroom. That's what I
great.
do. Go in. So let's
Sounds
get
good.
let's get together offline and we'll.
Okay. Sounds
I'll tell
good.
you what
Thank
time.
you.
Okay.
Thank you, Vic, for allowing me to visit with you tonight.
Yeah, we'll make it more often, and I look forward to visiting the Madison Club again, and be in touch with Lee and Mary and the other Community Achieves coordinators later this week, because I've got half the books in for the April delivery, so we'll get those to the schools.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very
Come
much.
back and
Stay
see us.
healthy.
Good night.
Good night.
night.
Thank you,
Take
care.
Sharon.
Bye, Mary.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. Bye-bye.
Good night. Thank you.